Ethan Walker carried a woman through the rain with both arms, her body limp and soaking against his chest, her lips turning blue, her eyes barely open, and when he finally got her through his front door and onto the couch, the first thing she did was whisper, "Don't call anyone." Please. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her face. He didn't know that the woman he was covering with a blanket from his daughter's bed was worth more money than every building in Willow Creek, Ohio combined, and that somewhere in a glass tower, 200 miles away, a room full of lawyers was already fighting over who got to control her empire while she lay shivering in a mechanic's living room. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, because you are not going to want to miss what happens next. The rain had been falling since 4 in the afternoon, and by the time Ethan finished replacing the head gasket on Dale Pruitt's 2009 Silverado, the parking lot outside the shop was 3 inches deep in standing water. He wiped his hands on a shop rag that was already too dirty to do much good, added the final charge to the invoice, and watched Dale squint at the total, the way men do when they know the number is fair, but wish it wasn't. "I can do $250 now," Dale said. "Rest on Friday when my check clears." Ethan looked at the invoice. The parts alone had cost him $230. He'd been awake since 5 in the morning. His back hurt from bending over that engine for 6 hours, and he had $11 and some change in his personal checking account until his own receivables came in. He looked at Dale's hands, cracked knuckles, grease under the fingernails that matched his own, the particular kind of tired that settled into a man's face when he'd been working physical labor for 30 years. "$250's fine," Ethan said. "Pay me the rest when you can." Dale nodded with the quiet dignity of a man who didn't like accepting kindness, but understood he had no other choice. He drove off into the rain, and Ethan stood in the open bay of Walker Auto and listened to the water hammer down on the metal roof. He locked up at 10 past 10. The drive from the shop to his house on Birch Street normally took 8 minutes. That night it took closer to 20 because the rain was coming down hard enough that his wipers couldn't keep up, and he'd learned years ago not to push it on wet roads. He had one thing left in this world that he absolutely could not afford to lose, and she was home right now with Mrs. Kelsey from next door, watching cartoons and waiting for him to walk through the door. He was thinking about Lily when he saw the woman. She was sitting on the concrete steps of the old Westfield Station building, the one that had been closed since 2014 when the regional rail line got cut. The station sat back from the road about 40 feet, half hidden behind a row of overgrown hedges that the city kept promising to trim. Most nights you wouldn't even see it in the dark. But Ethan's headlights hit the hedges at an angle as he came around the curve, and for just a second they lit up the space behind them, and he saw her. A woman hunched over, coat pulled tight. He drove past. He made it another 200 yards before he stopped the truck. He sat there with the engine running and the rain pounding the windshield and his hands on the wheel. He thought about the $11. He thought about Lily asleep in her bed by now, probably Mrs. Kelsey dozing in the armchair with the TV too loud. He thought about the furnace filter he kept forgetting to replace, and the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, and the letter from the bank that he hadn't opened yet because he already knew what it was going to say. He thought about all of those things. He put the truck in reverse. He found her half fallen off the bottom step, one hand on the wet concrete, her whole body shaking with a kind of cold that went past shivering into something that looked like pain. She was wearing a dark coat that had been expensive once, maybe, but had been soaked through so many times that the lining was coming apart at the seams. Her hair was plastered against her face. She wasn't young, somewhere in her late 40s. Ethan guessed, though it was hard to say in the dark and the rain, and she had the particular look of someone who had been trying to hold herself together for so long that she'd finally just stopped. "Hey," he crouched down beside her. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. They were dark brown, sharp even through the exhaustion, and for a moment she kind of looked at with but all in the sucked him. She'd learned to be afraid of strangers. He'd seen that look before. His wife had worked at the women's shelter on Clement Street before she got sick, and he'd given enough rides, enough drop-offs, enough quiet contributions to understand what it meant when a woman looked at you, like she was calculating the distance to the nearest exit. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I'm just a guy who saw you from the road." "My name is Ethan." She didn't say anything. "You're hypothermic," he said. "Or close to it. I need to get you warm." "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was low and clear and completely at odds with her condition, the kind of voice that had once been used to giving directions, not receiving them. "No, ma'am, you're not." He stood up and held out his hand. "I've got a truck right there. I can take you to the county emergency room, or I can take you someplace warm. Your call." She looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she looked at the rain. Then she looked back at him, and something in her face shifted, not trust, exactly, but the decision to stop fighting what was already decided. "Not the hospital," she said. "Okay." He helped her up. She was lighter than he expected, and she took his arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong for someone who'd been sitting in the freezing rain. He got her to the truck and helped her into the back seat and found the blanket behind the passenger seat, the old brown wool one he kept there for Lily when they went camping in the fall, and put it around her shoulders. He turned the heat up all the way and started driving. "What's your name?" he asked. A pause. Long enough that he thought she might not answer. "Claire," she said. "Claire Morgan. You got family around here, Claire?" "No." "Friends? Somewhere you're supposed to be?" "No." He nodded. He didn't push it. He'd learned a long time ago that when someone who clearly had a story told you no 3 times in a row, they weren't ready to tell you the story yet, and pushing was the fastest way to make sure they never would. He pulled into the driveway on Birch Street at 10:45. The light was on in the living room, which meant Mrs. Kelsey was still up. He helped Claire out of the truck and up the front steps, and he opened the door to find Meredith Kelsey standing in the hallway with her coat already on, her purse in one hand, and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, staring at the two of them. "Ethan James Walker," she said. "Evening, Mrs. Kelsey." "Who is this woman?" "This is Claire. She needs somewhere warm to sleep." "Is Lily down?" Mrs. Kelsey looked at Claire with the particular expression of a woman who had seen enough of life to know when to ask questions and when to just start boiling water. She set her purse on the hallway table. "Lily's been asleep since 9, she said. "I'll put the kettle on." That was the thing about living in a small town for 39 years. Some people made things complicated because they could. Other people just put the kettle on. He got Claire settled in the spare room, the one that had been his office until he'd turned it into a guest room 2 years ago, when his brother-in-law needed a place to stay for 3 months after the divorce. It wasn't much. A single bed with a good mattress, a dresser, a window that looked out over the backyard. He found a set of dry clothes, a flannel shirt, and a pair of sweatpants that had been in the back of the closet since his wife, Rachel, was alive. He put them outside the door, knocked, and told Claire they were there. Mrs. Kelsey made soup from a can and tea from a bag, and sat at the kitchen table until she was satisfied that Claire had eaten enough to produce some color in her cheeks. Then she pulled on her coat, took her purse back from the hallway table, and said goodnight with the particular eye of a woman who knew when she was done. After she left, the house was quiet. Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and listened to the rain, and did the math he'd been avoiding all evening. The bank letter was still unopened on the counter. The furnace filter was still overdue. The $250 from Dale Pruitt was sitting in the shop's register, but after he covered the cost of the parts, he was making $45 on a 6-hour job, which worked out to something embarrassing per hour that he'd stopped calculating because the number made him tired. The loan payment on the shop was due in 12 days. He had about 60% of it. He opened the bank letter. It was what he'd expected. A formal notice. 60 days to bring the commercial account current or they would begin default proceedings. He read it twice, folded it neatly, and put it back in the envelope. Then he got up and checked that the back door was locked and the thermostat was set to 68, which was as high as he could afford to run it, and went down the hall to look in on Lily. She was asleep on her side, with one arm wrapped around a stuffed bear named Captain that had been with her since she was 2 years old. Her dark hair was spread out across the pillow, and she was breathing with the deep, uncomplicated rhythm of a child who had never once doubted that the world was safe. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment and let that image do what it always did, reset something inside him that kept getting knocked sideways by everything else. He'd promised Rachel, lying in that hospital bed in the last week, when the clarity that comes before the end had stripped everything else away. Rachel had taken his hand and said one thing: "Take care of our girl, that's all. No advice, no instructions, no last words that would look good in a speech. Just that, take care of our girl." He was doing his best. He went to bed. He was up at 5:15 as usual, and by the time he had coffee going and the eggs started, he heard movement from the spare room. He wasn't sure what he expected, for her to be gone maybe, the way people sometimes were when the crisis passed, and the daylight came, and they didn't want to owe anything to anyone. But at 5:40 he heard the door open, and Claire Morgan appeared in the hallway wearing Rachel's flannel shirt and looking like someone who had slept for the first time in weeks. She stopped when she saw him at the stove. "You cook," she said. "Every morning." She looked around the kitchen the way people do when they're trying to read a house, taking inventory without being obvious about it. He noticed her eyes go to the drawings on the refrigerator, the small framed photo on the windowsill above the sink, the 3 coffee mugs lined up by the coffee maker, one of them clearly a child's mug with a cartoon dog on it. "You have a child," she said. "Daughter Lily. She's 9. She'll be up in about 40 minutes. He nodded toward the table. "You drink coffee?" "Yes." "A pause, please." He poured 2 cups, and she sat down at the table, and he put a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her without asking whether she was hungry, because he could see she was, and he went back to the stove to toast the bread. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know. I mean, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know you were sitting in the rain last night, and you needed help." He brought the toast to the table and sat across from her. "That's enough for right now." She looked at him over the rim of the coffee mug. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read, not suspicion exactly, more like the face of someone who was used to understanding people quickly and was finding, for once, that they couldn't. "Most people would have questions," she said. "I've got plenty." He picked up his fork. "But I figure you'll tell me what I need to know when you're ready, and everything else is your business." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My car broke down 2 days ago. Outside of Medina. I had been driving and I ran out of gas, and then the battery died, and I didn't have my phone." She said it, carefully, like someone building a story one piece at a time, and Ethan listened without interrupting, because he could hear the places where the story had been edited, where the real version had been smoothed over to produce the acceptable one. He'd done enough of that himself to recognize it in someone else. "Okay," he said. "I walked. I found a gas station, but I didn't. There was a misunderstanding with my credit card, and I couldn't get it sorted out, and by the time it was dark, I was just trying to find somewhere dry." "Okay," he said again. She looked at him. "You're not going to tell me I should have called someone?" "Should you have a pause? Probably, but you didn't." "No." He nodded and ate his eggs. Outside the kitchen window, the rain had finally stopped, and the early November sky was going from black to deep gray, and somewhere down the street a neighbor was starting a car. The sound of the town waking up. "You can stay," he said, "until you get yourself sorted. Guest room's yours, no charge. Only rule is you have to eat breakfast with us because I make too much, and Lily will ask you 40 questions, but she means well." Claire set down her coffee mug. She looked at him with that same unreadable expression, and then something in her face softened, not all the way, not to the point of tears or gratitude that needed to be spoken out loud, just a degree or two, just enough to see it. "Why?" she said. Ethan considered the question. "Because my wife would have wanted me to," he said. "And because it's the right thing to do. And because I make good eggs, and it seems like a waste to eat them alone." Lily came down the stairs at 6:20 in her socks, stopped dead in the kitchen doorway, looked at Claire with the direct and entirely unguarded curiosity of a 9-year-old, and said, "Who are you?" "My name is Claire. Why are you wearing my mom's shirt?" Ethan set down his coffee mug. "Lily, it's all right," Claire said, and she looked at Lily with an expression that surprised Ethan, not the careful, managed warmth of someone performing kindness, but something more genuine and a little raw. "I needed dry clothes. Your dad was kind enough to lend them to me." Lily considered this, with the systematic thoroughness she applied to most problems. "Were you in the rain?" "I was." "Dad drives around looking for people in the rain," Lily said, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone describing a well-established family policy. "He found Mrs. Acker's dog once, and Mr. Tillman when his car broke down on Route 9. He didn't mention that. He wouldn't." Lily climbed up into her chair. "He's embarrassing about it." She looked at her father. "Are there eggs?" Claire stayed. Not because she asked to, and not because Ethan pressed her. It happened the way things do in a house where the habits of daily life have their own momentum. She was there at breakfast, and then she helped clear the table, and then Ethan said he had to get to the shop by 8, and asked if she'd be all right. And she said yes. And when he came home at 6:30, she was sitting at the kitchen table with Lily doing something that involved index cards and colored markers. And there was a pot of soup on the stove that smelled like it had been going since noon. He stood in the doorway to the kitchen, with his jacket still on, and looked at the two of them, bent over the table together. "She's helping me study for my geography test," Lily said without looking up. "She knows where every country is. It's not normal." "Where'd you learn that?" Ethan asked. Claire glanced up. "I traveled," she said, "a lot." He hung up his jacket. He washed his hands at the sink and looked at the soup on the stove, which was clearly not from a can, and had vegetables he was fairly sure hadn't been in the refrigerator that morning. "You went to the store," he said. "I found some cash in my coat pocket." She said it simply, without the elaborate preemptive apology that would have made it awkward. "I hope that's all right." "More than all right," he said. He ate 2 bowls of it. Over the next few days a shape emerged. Claire was an early riser like him, so she was usually in the kitchen, but a time downstairs, and she'd figured out where everything was without asking. She helped Lily get ready for school, in the mornings when Ethan had to be at the shop early. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she was precise and direct, and Ethan had the persistent sense that she was someone who had spent years choosing every word carefully, and was only now beginning to let that discipline relax. She never talked about her past. He never asked. He told her about Rachel. Not all at once, not in any kind of formal conversation, but in the way it came out naturally when you lived with someone. Mentioning that the plant on the windowsill had been Rachel's. Saying, "Rachel used to do that too," when Claire put the bread in the freezer. The photograph on the windowsill was there every morning. And eventually Claire asked, and he told her, and she listened the way people listen when they understand grief from the inside. "How long?" she asked. 3 years, he said, "pancreatic." She was 37, "I'm sorry," he nodded. "How did she stop?" "Started again. Lily seems like a very happy child." "She has her moments," Ethan said. "But yeah, she's pretty resilient." He thought about how to say the next thing. "I think she gets it from Rachel." Rachel was the kind of person who figured out pretty early that being miserable was a choice, and she decided not to make it. "I try to do the same." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds very simple. Most true things are." She looked at him with that expression he still couldn't quite name. Like she was trying to figure out whether he was real. He was real. That was the problem, or at least part of it. Claire Morgan had spent 23 years building Morgan Horizon Holdings, from a boutique real estate investment firm into a global development corporation that touched 6 continents and employed 40,000 people. She had been profiled in every major business publication. She had been on the cover of 2 magazines. She had given a TEDx talk that had 11 million views. She had rooms full of people whose entire purpose was to make sure she was never cold, never hungry, never lost. And somehow none of them had managed to do what this man had done by pulling over on a dark road in the rain. She thought about that. She thought about it a lot, lying in the dark of the spare room on Birch Street with the quat sounds of a house with two other people in it, around her. The furnace clicking on. Lily talking in her sleep sometimes. Ethan's alarm going off at 5:15. She had left her company 10 days before she ended up on those steps outside the Westfield station. She'd told no one. She'd handed her phone to her driver, taken the car she kept registered under a different name for privacy reasons, and driven away from the Morgan Horizon headquarters in Columbus with no destination and no plan. It had been the first genuinely impulsive decision she had made in probably 15 years. She'd wanted to see. That was the only way she could explain it to herself. She had been shown report after report, projection after projection, impact assessment after impact assessment, and all of it had started to feel like a language she was fluent in, but that no longer corresponded to anything real. She wanted to see what real looked like. She hadn't expected to run out of gas in Medina. She hadn't expected the rain. She hadn't expected to collapse on a set of concrete steps in a town she'd never heard of, and be carried to safety by a man whose name she didn't know. And she absolutely had not expected that the safest she had felt in years would be in a small house, cracked furnace and a refrigerator covered in a child's drawing, and a man who made eggs every morning because it was the right thing to do. She should have told him who she was. She knew that. She'd known it from the first morning when she'd sat at his kitchen table and felt the story she was giving him bend around the truth she was keeping from him. She'd told herself it was temporary. She'd stay a day, maybe two, get herself sorted, and then she'd explain, and by then it would be simple enough that the explanation would be short. But one day had become two, and two had become a week, and the longer she stayed, bigger the gap between what she was saying and what was true became, until it felt less like a small omission and more like a lie she was living inside. And still, she hadn't left, because Lily had asked her to explain what a trade deficit was, and then argued with her about it for 20 minutes. In a way that was exactly right. And because Ethan had come home one evening, and put his head in his hands for just a moment, before he heard her come in and straightened up, and because she understood something about that moment, about the weight of keeping yourself together for the sake of someone who was counting on you, that she hadn't understood before she came here. She understood it now. She felt it in her own chest, the counterpart of it, the version that belonged to her. She was keeping it together too. She had been for a long time. She just hadn't known until she stopped. She was in the kitchen making dinner on a Wednesday evening, when she heard his truck in the driveway and then his footsteps on the porch. And when the door opened, he came in with his jaw set in a way she'd learned to read over the past 10 days. "What happened?" she asked. He set his keys on the counter. "You know Larkin Development?" The name went through her like a current. She kept her face still. The name sounds familiar. "Why?" "They've been buying up properties on the east side of town for the past 6 months. Residential, commercial. There's a rumor they're trying to consolidate the whole corridor, push out the small businesses, and put up a mixed-use development." He opened the refrigerator and stood looking into it without taking anything out, the way people do when the refrigerator is a place to stand that isn't anywhere else. "They came to see me today." Claire turned the burner down. "What did they want?" "They want the shop." He closed the refrigerator. "Building's in a good location, apparently. Right on the corner they need. They offered me fair market value for the property." He paused. "Which is less than what I owe on the loan." She waited. "Man in a nice suit," Ethan said, very polite. "Kept telling me it was an opportunity. Kept saying fair market value like it was a gift." He pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table and looked at his hands on the tabletop. "Walker Auto has been in that building since my father opened it in 1987. I took it over from him 11 years ago. I've got 4 employees. 2 of them have been with me since before Rachel died." "Did you say no?" "I said I'd think about it." Claire looked at him. "But you want to say no?" I want to say no, he said. But wanting to say no and being able to say no are two different things, and right now, I'm not sure I'm in a position to be choosing what I want. He looked up. The bank thing is, it's tight. It's been tight for a while. If I fight Larkin, I lose time and money I don't have. If I sell, I lose the shop. And either way, I've got Lily's school expenses coming up February and a furnace filter I keep forgetting about. And Ethan, she said. He stopped. You're not alone, she said. In this situation. I mean, there are probably options you haven't looked at yet. He looked at her with the half smile that was his version of skepticism. You're an expert in commercial real estate law now? I know a few things about business, she said carefully. What kind of business? She paused a half beat too long. Various kinds, she said. He studied her face the way he did sometimes that quiet, direct attention that she had decided early on was not aggressive, but was completely impossible to deflect. Claire, he said, I don't know your whole story. I'm not asking for it. But I get the feeling that whoever you were before you ended up on those steps, you were somebody who knew how to handle a problem. She looked at him. So if you've got any ideas, he said, I'm listening. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, the first freeze of November had come in, and the backyard was crystalline and still. She thought about telling him. She thought about the exact words, the sequence of them, the way his face would change when she said the name Morgan Horizon Holdings, and the connection between that name and Larkin Development clicked in place. She thought about what would happen to the particular quality of this kitchen table, this shared meal, this conversation between two people who were both carrying something heavy and had found, in each other, a reason to put it down briefly. Let me look into it, she said. Before you make any decisions, let me look into it. He held her gaze for a moment, then he nodded. Okay, he said. And she turned the burner back up, and neither of them said anything else about it. For the rest of the evening, and Lily came downstairs in her pajamas at 7:45 asking about homework, and the house went on doing what it did. And Claire stood at the stove with her back to the room and the sound of the family she was hiding inside of all around her. And she thought about what it was going to cost her when the truth finally came. Because it was going to come. She knew that much. The only question was whether she would be the one to bring it. The morning after Ethan carried Claire through his front door, she was already awake before him. He came downstairs at 5:15 to find her sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she had made herself, staring at nothing in particular. And she looked up when she heard his footsteps on the stairs, with an expression that told him she hadn't slept much. Not the disoriented look of someone interrupted mid-dream. The sharp, worn-through look of someone who had been thinking hard for hours, and hadn't come to any conclusions they were satisfied with. You found the coffee, he said. I hope that's all right. That's more than all right. He went to the coffee maker and poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. You sleep okay? She looked at him for a moment before she answered, and he noticed again the way she did that slight pause between question and response, like she was not just what to say but how much of the true answer to include. Well enough, she said. Thank you. He nodded and didn't push it. Outside the kitchen window the sky was still black, and the neighborhood was the particular quiet that only existed in the hour before the world remembered itself. He pulled out the pan and cracked 4 eggs without asking whether she was hungry. Because he could see she was, and some things didn't need to be negotiated. They ate without talking much, which should have been awkward and wasn't. He'd noticed that about her. In the first 12 hours she didn't fill silence the way some people did, with noise that was really just anxiety wearing the costume of conversation. She was comfortable being quiet. So was he. It was one of the things Rachel used to say about him, that he was the only man she'd ever met who could sit in a room with another person and not feel obligated to perform. Lily came down at 6:20 and stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at Claire with the evaluating stare of a 9-year-old who has already decided she has opinions. You're still here, Lily said. I am, Claire said. Dad said you might leave early. Lily, Ethan said. I'm just saying what you said. Claire looked at Ethan with something close to amusement. He's not wrong, she said. I thought I might. She looked back at Lily. But the coffee was very good, and I changed my mind. Lily considered this, with the seriousness it apparently deserved. Dad makes the coffee the night before and sets the timer, she said. So really, it's the machine. Then the machine is very good. It's a Mr. Coffee, Lily said, from Target. It's not that special. She climbed into her chair and looked at the plate Ethan set in front of her. Is she staying for more days? That's up to Claire, Ethan said. Lily looked at Claire. You can have the guest room, she said. It used to be Dad's office, but he doesn't use it anymore because he does everything at the shop. There's a good blanket. I picked it. Claire set down her coffee mug. You picked it? When Dad said we should make the room nice. In case someone needed it someday. I picked the blanket. It's the blue one, did you see it? I did, Claire said. It's a very good blanket. Lily nodded with satisfaction. I know, she said, and went back to her eggs. Ethan watched Claire watching his daughter. And he saw something move across her face that she didn't try to hide and probably didn't know was visible. Something that looked a lot like the particular ache of being reminded that the world contained things you had forgotten to want. He looked away before she caught him looking. After he dropped Lily at school and drove to the shop, he spent the first hour of the morning doing what he always did when something was sitting heavy in the back of his mind. He worked. He got under a customer's Jeep and replaced a cracked CV axle and didn't think about Claire Morgan or the bank letter or Larkin Development. And by the time he slid back out from under the vehicle and stood up and wiped his hands, he felt slightly more like himself. His shop foreman, a 52-year-old man named Gerald Pruitt, who was no relation to Dale Pruitt, despite what half the town assumed, came over with a clipboard and a look on his face that Ethan recognized. What? Ethan said. You got a call while you were under the Jeep, Gerald said. Guy from Larkin Development, name of Bryce Calloway. Said he wants to schedule a follow-up conversation. Ethan took the clipboard. I told them I'd think about it. I know what you told them, Gerald said. I'm telling you what they said. He paused. Ethan, that offer they made, I know what the offer was, Gerald. It covers the loan. It covers the loan and it puts me on the street. It puts you on the street with money in your pocket and no debt. Ethan looked at him. Gerald had been with the shop for 9 years. He had a wife and 2 kids in middle school and a mortgage of his own, and Ethan was aware, acutely aware, that his decision about this building was not only his to make. Whatever he chose rippled out. That was the thing nobody talked about when they talked about small business, the way the owner's problems were never only the owner's problems. Let me make some calls, Ethan said. To who? I don't know yet. He handed back the clipboard. Give me a few days. Gerald took the clipboard and looked at him, with the expression of a man who had worked for him long enough to know when to push and when to let it alone. He let it alone. The drive home that evening was quiet. Ethan sat at 2 red lights and thought about the conversation he was going to have with Claire, not because he decided to have it. Exactly, but because he could feel it coming the way you feel weather. She had said the night before that she knew things about business. She had said it carefully, in that edited way of hers, and he had let it pass. But he was running out of time to let things pass. He pulled into the driveway and sat in the truck for a minute with the engine off. Inside the house, the kitchen light was on. He went in. She was. That stove, and the smell hit him before he got through the door, something with garlic and rosemary, and what turned out to be a chicken she had apparently bought and broken down herself, because the bones were in a separate pot, already making stock. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at this for a moment, and then at her, moving around his kitchen with a quiet efficiency of someone who cooked not as a hobby but as an act of concentration. A place to put her mind when she needed it occupied. Long day? She asked without turning around. Long enough, he said. He set his keys down. Larkin called the shop. She turned then. Her expression was even, but her eyes sharpened. What did they say? They want a follow-up meeting. They're pushing. He pulled out a chair. Claire, I need to ask you something directly. She turned the burner down and turned to face him fully. All right, you said you know things about business. I'm not asking you to explain your whole history to me. But I need to know whether you know enough to tell me if I have any options here that I haven't seen yet, because right now from where I'm standing, it looks like I've got two choices, and both of them cost me something I can't get back. She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her making the decision in real time, the internal calculation, what to give and what to keep. The loan on the shop, she said. What are the terms? He told her. Rate, balance, payment schedule, the whole picture. He'd never laid it out that clearly for anyone, not even Gerald, not even his brother-in-law, because there was something about saying it all, in sequence, that made it feel very final. She listened without interrupting and without the expression of someone being polite while waiting for their turn to talk. She actually listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What's the loan-to-value ratio on the building?" He blinked. "What? The building? What did you pay for it, and what's your outstanding balance?" He told her. "And current market value. Whatever Larkin's offering, minus the premium they're paying for location." She nodded slowly. "You could refinance," she said. "If the current value is above the balance, which it sounds like it is, you could pull cash out in the refinance, reduce your monthly payment, and buy yourself time. Depending on the rate you're currently at, you might come out significantly ahead on cash flow." He stared at her. "I know a bank," she said carefully. "Not locally. They do commercial lending. I have some contacts there who might be willing to look at your file." "Claire," he said slowly, "who are you?" She held his gaze. Something in her face did something he hadn't seen it do before, a kind of fracture, very small, at the edges. "Someone who's made a lot of decisions about money," she said. "And not enough decisions about people." It wasn't an answer. He knew it wasn't an answer. And he let it be what it was, because pushing it tonight felt like the wrong choice. And he'd learned over 39 years that the wrong choice made at the right moment could close a door that would have opened by itself if you'd waited. "Tell me more about the refinance," he said, and she did. For 2 hours, while the chicken finished, and the stock simmered, and Lily sat with them at the table, doing homework and occasionally weighing in on financial concepts with the total confidence of a child who has no idea what she doesn't know. Claire Morgan laid out a strategy for Walker Auto that was specific, detailed, and built on a depth of knowledge that Ethan Walker, who had been managing the practical realities of commercial property and small business finance for 11 years, recognized as something several levels above his own. He didn't say that, but he knew it, and the knowing of it shifted. Something added a piece to the picture of this woman that changed its shape, though he still couldn't see what shape it was becoming. Lily fell asleep on the couch at 8:30 with her homework half finished, and Ethan carried her upstairs and tucked her in and came back down to find Claire at the kitchen table with a pen and a legal pad she'd found somewhere, working through numbers in a handwriting that was small and precise and completely unhurried. She looked up when he sat down. "She's out?" Claire asked. "Completely," he said. He looked at the legal pad. "You didn't have to do all that. I wanted to. Why?" She set the pen down. She looked at the table for a moment, and then at him, and when she spoke it was with the particular directness of someone who has decided to stop being careful, at least about this one thing. "Because you helped me when you didn't have to," she said. "Because you asked nothing in return. Because in 23 years in a very long time of working with people who wanted things from me, I have not once sat at someone's kitchen table and felt like what I said mattered because it was true, and not because of what I could do for them." The kitchen was very quiet. "It matters," he said. "What you said tonight. All of it. That's the first time since the bank letter that I've felt like I had a path forward." She nodded. She picked up the pen again. He watched her write for a moment. "Claire," he said, "whatever it is you're not telling me, you don't have to tell me tonight." She stopped writing. "But at some point," he said, "I think you're going to want to. Not because I need to know, but because carrying a thing alone gets heavy. And you look tired." She didn't move for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "I am tired no," he said. "I can see it." She set the pen down again and looked at him with an expression that was the most unguarded he had seen from her. Stripped of the careful management and the edited answers and the particular armor of someone who had spent decades deciding exactly how much of themselves to present. For just a moment, she was simply a person sitting at a kitchen table at 8:30 in the evening, very tired, not entirely sure what to do next. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night, Claire." He turned off the kitchen light. She went down the hall to the guest room with the blue blanket that Lily had picked, and he went upstairs, and the house settled into its nighttime sounds. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Ethan Walker lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the way she'd said those two words. Not what I could do for them. 23 years, the precision of it. The weight. He thought about that for a long time. He didn't figure it out that night. But the pieces were starting to arrange themselves in a way that had a shape, even if he couldn't name it yet. 3 days passed. The routine of the house absorbed Claire the way routines do. When they're strong enough, she woke early. She made coffee. She helped with Lily's homework in the evenings, and sometimes during the day. And she moved through the space of Ethan's life with a tact and a quietness that he found increasingly not just comfortable, but necessary in some way he hadn't anticipated. The house had been functioning before she arrived. He and Lily had their rhythms, their inside jokes, their system for who took out the recycling and who was responsible for feeding the radiator in the hallway that made a sound like a dying animal if you let it run dry. But there was something different now, a texture to the evenings that hadn't been there before. He noticed it one night when Lily was telling a long and structurally ambitious about something that had happened at recess, and Claire was listening with her chin in her hand and her eyes completely focused, asking questions at exactly the right moments, and Lily's face had the particular lit-up quality of a child who feels genuinely heard. And Ethan sat across the table from both of them and felt something that he didn't have a clean name for, not happiness exactly, which implied a simplicity. This situation didn't have more like the particular resonance of something that fitted together the way it was supposed to. He missed Rachel. He always missed Rachel. But this was different from the absence of Rachel. This was its own thing, and recognizing it as its own thing made him careful. On the 4th day, Gerald called the shop instead of showing up, which meant something was wrong before Ethan even picked up. The Larkin people came by, Gerald said, in person. 2 of them, nice suits, both of them. The kind of suits that mean they flew here instead of drove. A pause. They left a letter. Ethan felt the cold line of it along his jaw. "What kind of letter?" "The legal kind," Gerald said. "I didn't open it. It's on your desk." Another pause, and then Gerald said the thing he'd been building to since he picked up the phone. "Ethan, there's something else. One of my buddies over at City Planning, he called me this morning. Larkin's filed for a zoning variance on the East Corridor. If it goes through, they can start eminent domain proceedings on commercial properties that fall inside the affected zone." The word landed hard. Eminent domain. The legal mechanism by which what you owned stopped being yours because someone with more resources decided they needed it more. "That can't be right," Ethan said. "That's for public projects. Roads, infrastructure. It used to be," Gerald said. "The law changed. Developers can now petition for eminent domain designation if the project meets certain economic development criteria." He paused again. "Walker Auto is right in the middle of that zone, Ethan." Ethan sat down on the stool behind the counter. The shop was empty around him. One car up on the lift. The tools exactly where he always kept them. Everything in its place. His father's shop. His name on the sign outside. "How long do I have?" he asked. "The variance hearing is in 3 weeks," Gerald said. "If they get it, you've got maybe 60 days after that before they can move." Ethan thanked him and hung up. He sat very still for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called home. Claire answered, on the second ring, which meant she was in the kitchen, which was where she always was, at 10 in the morning, which was a pattern he had apparently tracked without deciding to. Something happened, he said, a brief pause. Tell me, he told her. All of it: Gerald's call, the eminent domain information, the zoning variance, the timeline. He told it plainly and without editorializing, because that was how he processed things, getting them out in their correct sequence before deciding how to feel about them. When he finished, Claire said nothing for a moment. And then she said something that changed everything. Larkin Development, she said, and her voice had shifted, still controlled, but something underneath it had gone very still, in a way that was different from her usual stillness. Is the project they filed for? What's the name of the development? Gerald said they're calling it Horizon East, Ethan said. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted exactly 4 seconds. He counted them without meaning to. Claire, he said. I'm here, she said. You know something about this project. It wasn't a question. He'd crossed the line from wondering to knowing, and they both understood it. Ethan, she said, and stopped, and started again. Come home at lunch, please, Claire, please, she said. I need to tell you something. I should have told you days ago, and I didn't, and I'm just come home. He drove home at noon. She was standing in the kitchen when he came through the door, not doing anything, not making coffee, not cooking, not writing on that legal pad. Just standing with her arms at her sides and her face set with the look of someone who has made a decision and is now committed to seeing it through regardless of what it costs. He sat down at the kitchen table without taking his jacket off. She sat across from him. My name is Claire Morgan, she said. My full name. And that I know that doesn't mean anything to you yet. And in about 60 seconds it's going to mean a great deal. And I need you to let me get through all of it before you react, because I need you to hear the whole thing. He looked at her. He nodded once. She told him. Not everything, not the full 23 years, not every board meeting and acquisition and strategy session and global development deal, but the shape of it. Morgan Horizon Holdings, the company she had built. Its size, its reach. The fact that Larkin Development was a subsidiary, a regional development arm of Morgan Horizon, that operated semi-independently under the management of her business partner, Richard Hale. She told him about leaving. Walking out of the headquarters in Columbus, with her phone handed off and no destination. The car running out of gas in Medina, the rain. His truck pulling over on the dark road in a town she'd never heard of. She told him that she had not planned to stay, that she had not planned any of this, that she had not known, when she sat down at his kitchen table the first morning, that the company whose subsidiary was threatening his shop was the company she owned. She said that last part twice, because it mattered, and she needed him to hear it. When she stopped talking, the kitchen was very quiet. Ethan sat with his hands flat on the table and looked at her face, and did not speak for what felt like a long time. Horizon East, he finally said. That's your company's project. Richard Hale's project, she said. He's been running the Regional Development Division without my direct oversight for the past 2 years. This is not something I approved. This is not something I knew about until you told me the name 20 minutes ago. But it's your company. Yes, she said, it's my company. He stood up. He didn't go anywhere, just stood. Because he needed to be standing, needed to not be sitting still with the weight of this. He walked to the kitchen window and stood with his back to her, and looked at the backyard and the bare November trees and thought about Gerald, and his 4 employees, and his father's name on the sign, and Lily's face at breakfast every morning. I trusted you, he said. Not loudly, not with anger, exactly more with the particular exhaustion of a man who has been careful all his life about who he let in, and has found out that being careful is not the same as being safe. I know, she said. I brought you into my house, my daughter's house. I know, and you sat at my table every morning, knowing that the company that wants to destroy my shop. I didn't know, she said, and her voice was very steady and very clear. I did not know about Horizon East until 20 minutes ago. I knew I owned Morgan Horizon. I knew I had not been honest with you about who I was. Those are 2 different things, Ethan. And I am not asking you to forgive the second one. I'm asking you to believe me about the first. He turned around. She was still sitting at the table, very straight, her hands folded in front of her, and she was looking at him with an expression that was completely open, no management, no editing, no careful architecture of what she chose to present. Just her face, and what was in it, which was something that looked a lot like the terrifying simplicity of someone telling the full truth and having nothing left to hide behind. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said, "from the beginning? Why didn't you just say?" She took a breath. "Because for the first time in longer than I can remember," she said, "someone was talking to me like I was a person. Not an executive, not a billionaire, not a name that opened doors or a signature that moved money. Just a person at a kitchen table eating eggs." She paused. "I didn't want to lose that. I know how that sounds." He stood at the window for a long moment. "It sounds honest," he said. She looked at him. "It sounds like you were scared," he said, "of going back to being whoever you were before you ended up on those steps." Her jaw moved slightly. "Yes," she said. "I get that," he said. And he did. He understood the specific terror of stepping out of something that felt real, into something that felt like performance. Understood it the way only someone who had spent 3 years figuring out how to be a father and a mechanic and a person all at once without losing any of the three could understand it. "But you still should have told me." "I know, and we're going to have a longer conversation about this," he said. "Tonight, all of it." "Yes," she said, "whatever you want to know." He nodded. He looked at the table and then at her, and then at the table again. "The shop," he said. "Horizon East. Is there something you can do?" She sat up slightly. And for the first time since he'd walked through the door, something in her face shifted from exposed and afraid to something sharper. Something that looked a lot like the particular kind of resolve that comes from a person who has been very good at something for a very long time and has just been given a clear reason to use it. "It's my company," she said. "Richard Hale does not get to bulldoze a man's life without my signature, and he does not have my signature, and he is not going to get it." She paused. "But I'm going to need a phone." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and set his phone on the table between them. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. "This is going to get complicated," she said. "My life is already complicated," he said. "Make the call." She picked up the phone. She held it for a moment, and he could see that the act of picking it up something meant the end of the particular quiet she had built for herself inside his house, meant stepping back into the current of everything she had walked away from. He could see her deciding to do it anyway. She dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. A man's voice answered, and even from across the table, Ethan could hear the shock in it at the sound of her voice, and she said, very calmly, very clearly, the words that made Ethan Walker understand for the first time, in its full dimensions, exactly who was sitting at his kitchen table. "This is Claire Morgan," she said. "Get me Richard Hale. Tell him I'm back, and tell him to stop everything on Horizon East immediately, because if he doesn't, I will be in that boardroom by Thursday, and he will not like what I have to say when I get there." She set the phone down on the table. She looked at Ethan. He looked back at her. "Well, yes," she said. And neither of them said anything else for a moment, because there wasn't anything that needed to be said. The kitchen was the same kitchen it had always been, and the house was the same house. And the November light through the window was the same November light, and none of that had changed, and all of everything else had. Richard Hale called back in 11 minutes. Ethan knew, because he was still sitting at the kitchen table when it happened, jacket still on, watching Claire hold his phone with both hands on the surface in front of her like she was deciding whether to pick it up or let it ring. She picked it up on the second ring. "Richard," she said. Ethan couldn't hear the other end clearly, but he could hear the tone fast, layered, the particular cadence of a man who was simultaneously relieved and calculating, working out his position, even while he was still processing the shock. Claire listened for approximately 4 seconds. Then she said, "Stop talking." The other end went quiet. "I don't want an explanation," she said. "I want confirmation. Is Horizon East paused as of this moment?" A pause. "That's not what I asked you, Richard. I asked if it's paused. Another pause, shorter. Good. Don't restart anything without my direct authorization. I mean a call from this number, my voice, my explicit approval. Not an email, not a proxy. Me. She paused one more time, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped a register into something that was quiet and completely without flexibility. And Richard, if I find out that the zoning variance filing in Willow Creek moves forward before we've spoken in person, I will call the board myself. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She waited. Good. She ended the call and set the phone on the table. She looked at Ethan. It's paused, she said. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since Gerald's call that morning. It left him slowly, like air, from something that had been under pressure for a long time. Just like that, he said. Just like that, she said. But the way she said it told him it wasn't actually just like that the call had cost, something, had used something up, had put a series of things in motion that were not going to stop at, paused. What happens now? He asked. She looked at the phone in her hand. Now I have to go back, she said. It came out simply, without drama, but it landed in the room like a stone, dropping into still water, and they both felt the ripple. Lily came home from school at 3:15. She dropped her backpack in the hall with the reliable crash that signaled her arrival and appeared in the kitchen doorway in her coat, and her backpack still half on one shoulder. Already talking about something that had happened at lunch in Volvigren about the rules of Foursquare that she had opinions on. She stopped mid-sentence when she looked at their faces. What happened? She said. 9 years old, sharp as a tack. Ethan had learned early that there was no point trying to smooth things over with Lily, because she read rooms, the way other kids read picture books, quickly, confidently, and with complete retention. Claire and I are just talking about some things, Ethan said. Lily looked at Claire. Are you leaving? Claire held her gaze. I have to go take care of something, she said. Some things I left behind that need to be dealt with. When? Soon, Claire said. But not today. Lily studied her for another moment with that unnerving directness. Then she said, Okay, and went to the refrigerator and got out the juice and poured herself a glass and climbed up at the table and started in on her homework, like the conversation had been about the weather. But Ethan noticed she sat closer to Claire than she usually did, close enough that their arms almost touched, and she didn't say anything about it, and neither did Claire. That evening, after Lily was in bed, they sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours. Claire talked, not in the managed, edited way she had been talking since she arrived, choosing her words like a woman, laying stepping stones across water, but in the raw, sequential way of someone who had made a decision to stop carrying something alone and was now putting it all down on the table. She told him about Morgan Horizon, how she had built it from 32 employees and a single development contract in 2001 into a company that now touched 40,000 lives across 6 continents. She told him about Richard Hale, who had been her business partner since the beginning, who was brilliant and ruthless, and had been the right partner for the first 15 years, and had been slowly becoming the wrong one for the last 5. She told him about the board, which had been shifting in Richard's direction for the past 2 years as she spent more time on the company's philanthropic arm and less on the core development business, which Richard had taken as permission to accelerate the kind of high-margin, odd, community displacing that looked good on a quarterly project. Her report and looked like a wrecking ball from the street. She told him about the morning she left. How she had sat in her car in the parking structure under the Columbus headquarters and looked at her phone. 17 unread emails before. 8 in the morning, 4 meeting requests, 2 calls from board members, and understood with sudden and total clarity that she had not spoken to another human being in 6 months in a way that had nothing to do with leverage. I handed Marcus my phone, she said. He's been my driver for 11 years. I handed it to him, and I said I needed a few days. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. She paused. Maybe I had. Ethan was quiet for a moment. And then you ran out of gas in Medina. And then I ran out of gas in Medina, she said. And something in her face did something that was almost a smile. I had taken a car I keep registered separately for privacy. There was no phone, no credit cards linked to my name, just some cash I had in my coat pocket, and a car that apparently had a faulty fuel gauge. She paused. I walked 4 miles in the dark before I found a gas station. The card I had wouldn't process it was linked to the private registration, and the billing address didn't match the zip code I gave, and I couldn't explain without identifying myself. And I had spent 11 years protecting my privacy, and in that moment, it was the thing that was going to get me killed in the rain. Ethan said nothing. I kept walking, she said. I told myself I would find a motel. Then the rain got worse, and I was so cold I couldn't think clearly, and I sat down on those steps because my legs simply stopped working. She looked at the table. I remember thinking, this is absurd. I am worth more money than most small countries, and I am going to die on the steps of an abandoned train station in Ohio. She paused. And then your headlights went past. And then they came back, he said. And then they came back, she said. The kitchen was very still. Claire, he said. Why didn't you tell me after the first day? After the first hour even? She looked at him steadily. Because you made eggs, she said. He waited. You made eggs and you didn't ask me anything. And you poured coffee and you sat across the table from me, like I was just a person who needed breakfast. Not a problem to be managed, not an opportunity, not a risk. Just a person, she paused. I have not been just a person in a very long time, Ethan. I had forgotten what it felt like, and I was selfish about it. I wanted to keep it a little longer. He was quiet for a long time after that. I'm not angry, he finally said. I want to be. Some part of me thinks I should be. But I look at you sitting there, and I think about the last 2 weeks, and I can't get to angry. He paused. I can get to scared, she looked up. Of what? Of what comes next, he said. You go back to your company. You deal with Richard Hale. You stop the project, and then what? You're the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and I'm a mechanic in Ohio, and we go back to whatever our lives were before a dark road in the rain. She held his gaze. Is that what you want? She asked. I don't know what I want, he said. I know what I have. I have a shop and a daughter and a loan payment, due in 12 days and 4 employees, counting on me to figure out something I don't have a clear answer for yet. He paused. I also have this table and the last 2 weeks, and I'm not sure how to feel about losing that. You're not losing it, she said. Claire, you are not losing it, she said again quietly, but with a precision that stopped him. I am going to deal with Richard and the board. I am going to stop Horizon East permanently, not just pause it. And I am going to come back, she paused, if you'll have me. He looked at her for a long moment. Why? Because this is the first place in 23 years where I understood what I was actually doing any of it for, she said. And I am not ready to let that go, and neither, I think, are you. He didn't answer that. But he didn't disagree with it either, and she saw that, and it was enough. She left 2 days later. Ethan drove her to Columbus in the truck, which she tried to talk him out of, and he refused to negotiate on. The drive took 2 hours, and they spent most of it in the kind of conversation that had become natural between them, easy, interrupted, real. She asked him about his father, how he had learned the shop. He told her. She told him about her mother, who had raised her alone in Cincinnati after her father left when she was 7, who had worked double shifts at a hospital laundry and never once suggested that what Claire wanted was not possible. She's still alive, he asked. Yes, Claire said. She lives in Scottsdale now. I bought her a house. She paused. I see her twice a year. Maybe 3 times. She said it without self-pity, but with the particular flatness of a fact that had been examined and found wanting. She doesn't complain. She's not that kind of person. But I know. You should call her, Ethan said. I know. I mean soon, I know, Ethan. He glanced at her sideways. She was looking out the window, and she was almost smiling, which was a thing he had learned to watch for because it was rare and always genuine. He dropped her at the building on High Street that turned out to be the Columbus headquarters of Morgan Horizon Holdings, which was a glass tower that reflected the November sky back at itself and had her name on a discreet brass plate beside the main entrance. He sat in the truck and looked at that building, and then at her, standing on the sidewalk with nothing, no luggage, no bag, wearing clothes she'd borrowed from his house. His phone number, written on a piece of paper, tucked in her coat pocket because she didn't have her own phone yet. "You look like you're going to war," he said, through the open window. "I am," she said. "You going to win?" She looked at the building. "It's my company," she said, and walked through the door. He drove back to Willow Creek. He didn't hear from her for 2 days, which he spent working at the shop and not checking his phone more than was reasonable and telling himself he wasn't waiting. On the morning of the 3rd day, Gerald came in, looking like he'd swallowed something uncomfortable. "I heard something," Gerald said. "About what?" "Larkin. The Horizon East project." He paused. "The zoning variance application was withdrawn yesterday. Officially. City planning confirmed it this morning." Ethan set down the wrench in his hand. "Withdrawn," he said. "Completely," Gerald said, like it never existed. Ethan looked at the wall for a moment. Then he picked up the wrench and went back to work because there was a transmission that needed his attention, and he was a man who finished what he started. But his hands were not entirely steady. His phone rang at 6 that evening. Unknown number, he picked up. "It's me," Claire said. "I got a new phone." "I figured," he said. He was sitting in the parking lot of the shop, engine running, heat up. "Gerald told me about the variance. It's done," she said. "Permanently. I had the legal team file a formal withdrawal and an internal directive canceling the project." She paused. "Richard is angry." "How angry?" "The kind of angry that means he's already talking to lawyers." A brief pause. "He's going to challenge my authority over the Regional Development Division. He's been maneuvering toward it for 2 years. I see that now. My disappearance gave him the window he needed to accelerate." "Can he do that?" Ethan said. "Challenge you?" "He can try," she said. "He has relationships on the board. 3 members who have moved toward his position over the past 18 months. She paused. "I have the majority, for now. But he's going to make noise, and noise has a way of shifting things." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call a board meeting," she said. "Full session. I'm going to present a new strategic direction for the company, and I'm going to make the case so clearly that there's no room for his counter-argument." A pause. "And I'm going to need about 10 days to prepare." "Okay," he said. "Ethan," I said. "Okay, Claire." A pause. "How's Lily?" "She asked about you this morning," he said. Twice. He heard something in the silence that followed that he couldn't quite name. "Tell her I'll be back soon," Claire said. "She'll ask me to define soon." "Tell her before her geography test," Claire said. "That's in 8 days." I looked at her schedule. He sat in the truck after he hung up, and the November dark came down around him, and he thought about a woman who had been living in his house for 2 weeks and had somehow memorized his daughter's test schedule. He thought about what that meant and decided not to decide what it meant yet, because some things needed time to become what they were. The next 8 days moved fast. Claire called every evening, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour. She told him what was happening at Morgan Horizon, the board preparation, the strategy sessions, the documentation she was pulling together to demonstrate how far Richard Hale's regional development arm had drifted from the company's founding principles. He listened and asked questions, and told her about the shop and Lily and the small daily facts of Willow Creek, which she listened to with the attention of someone who understood their value. On the 4th day, she said, "I've been thinking about something." "Tell me." "The refinancing strategy I outlined for the shop." "I spoke to a contact at Meridian Commercial Lending. They want to look at your file. Numbers work. I ran them again. You could reduce your monthly payment by nearly 1/3 and pull enough cash out of the equity to cover the bank arrears." She paused. "I didn't commit you to anything. I just asked if they'd be willing to review the application." He was quiet for a moment. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said. "The same reason I worked on those numbers at your kitchen table. Because it's the right thing to do, and you deserve a path forward that doesn't involve selling your father's shop." He thought about arguing with her. He thought about the particular discomfort of accepting help from someone whose resources so vastly outweighed his own that the gesture, however genuine, came with a weight attached. He thought about pride, which he had a lot of, and about practicality, which he had more of, and about Lily and Gerald and the other 3 employees, and his father's name on the sign outside. "Send me the contact information," he said. On the 6th day, something happened that neither of them had anticipated. A journalist called the shop. Not a local reporter, a business journalist from a financial publication. The kind of name Eth had seen on a magazine rack but never read, calling from a 212 area code and asking in a voice that was professionally pleasant and professionally relentless whether it was true that Claire Morgan of Morgan Horizon Holdings had been living in Willow Creek, Ohio for the past 2 weeks at a private residence. Ethan said. No comment, which was not something he had ever said in his life, but which felt like the correct response, and hung up. He called Claire immediately. She answered on the first ring. "I know," she said before he spoke. "My PR director just called me. Someone leaked it. We don't know who, yet it might be Richard's people. It might be someone on the building staff who recognized me when you dropped me off. It's going to be in the press by tomorrow." Ethan felt something cold and specific move through him. Not fear exactly, more the particular sensation of a private thing becoming public, of the careful ordinary life he had been living, suddenly becoming a story someone else was going to tell. "What does that mean?" he said. "For you? For Lily?" "For me, it means a complicated news cycle, and a lot of questions I've been planning to answer on my own timeline." She paused, and her voice shifted into something careful. "For Lily, Ethan, I need you to talk to her school. Today, ask them to be prepared for media attention. Make sure her teacher knows. Make sure she's prepared." "Prepared for what?" he said. "She's 9, I know." The words came with a weight that told him she's understood the full dimension of what she was saying. "I'm sorry. I know this is not what you wanted. I know your life is private, and you keep it that way for a reason, and I—" She stopped. "This is my fault. The leak happened because of me." He stood in the middle of the shop with the phone against his ear, and the familiar sounds of the garage around him, and thought about Lily, who was at school right now doing geography and knowing nothing about any of this. And he made a decision quickly because quick was sometimes what a situation required. "It's not your fault," he said. "Let's deal with what's in front of us." "What do I say to the press if they call again?" "Nothing," she said immediately. "Refer everything to Morgan Horizon's communications office. I'm going to get you a direct number for my PR director. Her name is Sandra Park. She'll handle it." A brief pause. "Ethan, I'm going to address this publicly. I've been planning to control the narrative around my return. But if it's coming out anyway, I'd rather be the one who tells the story." "What story are you going to tell?" he said. A pause that was one beat longer than the others. "The true one," she said. "That a man I had never met stopped his truck on a dark road because it was the right thing to do. And that it changed things." She paused, "for both of us." He didn't say anything. "Is that all right?" she said. "Is it all right if I tell that part?" He thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, standing in his shop with grease on his hands and his name above the door and the bank letter that was now 3 days closer to its deadline. He thought about Rachel and what she would have said, which was probably something direct and wise and delivered without ceremony. The way she did everything. "Yeah," he said, "it's all right." By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Not the full story, the compressed version, the version that existed before the details arrived, which was splashy and incomplete, and had the particular energy of information that has been released before it has been shaped. Morgan Horizon CEO found living with Ohio family. Billionaire Claire Morgan's mysterious disappearance, the truth. He saw the headlines on his phone before he got out of bed at 5:15. And he put the phone face down on the nightstand and lay there in the dark for a minute before he got up. Because if he was going to handle this day, he was going to need to handle it from the inside out, starting with the quiet. He made eggs. He made coffee. He woke Lily up at 6 and sat her down at the kitchen table before she fully understood why. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked at him over her cereal bowl. Already awake, already reading him. "Is it about Claire?" "Yes." "Is she okay?" "She's fine," he said. But some people found out that she was staying with us, and they wrote about it online and in some papers, and I need you to know before you go to school today, because kids might have seen it." Lily processed this. What did they write? That she stayed here, he said. That she's someone important, and she stayed here, and I helped her. She is important, Lily said immediately. She knows where every country is. Ethan looked at his daughter. She's important in a different way, he said. She runs a very big company. She has a lot of money. Some people think that's a big deal. Is it? He thought about it. It's significant, he said. But it's not why we helped her. Lily stirred her cereal. I know why we helped her, she said. Because she was cold, and she needed help. That's what you do when someone is cold. He looked at her for a moment. Sometimes he had the humbling experience of his 9-year-old daughter cutting straight through to the center of a thing that he had been circling around. Yeah, he said, that's what you do. So what's the big deal, she said. No big deal, he said. I just wanted you to be ready. She went to school. He went to the shop. His phone rang 14 times in the first 2 hours, and he referred 12 of the calls to Sandra Park's number, and answered 2 that turned out to be his brother-in-law and Gerald's wife wanting to know if everything was okay. At 11 o'clock, Sandra Park herself called him. Mr. Walker, she said, I'm Claire's communications director. I want to walk you through what's happening today because Claire asked me to make sure you were not caught off guard. He appreciated the directness. Go ahead, he said. Claire is doing one interview, Sandra said. One only. She picked the outlet, and she's controlling the framing. It publishes this afternoon. She wanted me to tell you that she's telling the story accurately what actually happened, not a version managed for optics. She wanted you to know that before you read it. Okay, he said. She also asked me to tell you. A brief pause, the sound of someone reading something they were told to deliver word for word. She asked me to tell you that she's coming back to Willow Creek on Thursday for Lily's geography test. He stood in the middle of the shop with the phone against his ear and the article he hadn't read yet waiting on his phone and 4 employees who were trying not to look like they were listening. And he felt something settle into place inside him that had been slightly off-center for the past 8 days. Tell her that's fine, he said. Tell her we'll leave the porch light on. He read the article at lunch, sitting in the truck in the parking lot of the shop, with a sandwich he barely tasted. Claire had given the interview to a reporter she had worked with for years, someone she clearly trusted, and the story was told plainly, and without the breathless sensationalism of the earlier headlines. She talked about leaving Columbus. She talked about the gas and the rain and the steps of the Westfield station and the truck that came back. She talked about Ethan without making him into a character, not a hero, not a symbol, just a man who did what he thought was right, because that was how he was built. She talked about Lily and the blue blanket and the eggs every morning and what it had been like to sit at a table where nobody wanted anything from her. She talked about what she was going to do differently, not vaguely specifically, about Horizon East, which she called a mistake that had moved forward without proper oversight, about the company's direction under Richard Hale's influence on the regional development arm, about a new set of priorities she was bringing to the board. The last paragraph was the one that stayed with him. He read it 3 times, she had said. I went looking for what was real. I found it in a town I'd never heard of, in the home of a man who had every reason to drive past and chose not to. He didn't do it because he knew who I was. He did it because of who he is. I've spent 23 years building something I'm very proud of. This is the first time in a long time that I've understood what I was building it for. He put the phone in his pocket and finished the sandwich. That afternoon his phone rang again. Columbus area code, not a number he recognized. He answered, Mr. Walker. The voice was smooth and professional, and carried the particular tone of a man who was accustomed to controlling conversations. My name is Richard Hale. I know who you are, Ethan said. A brief pause. Then you know that I'm Claire's business partner, and that I have a significant stake in the direction of Morgan Horizon Holdings. Another pause, more calculated. I imagine you've read the interview she gave today. I have, Mr. Walker. I want to be very direct with you. Claire is a brilliant woman who has been under significant stress. Her disappearance was alarming to all of us, and I think her time in Willow Creek, while colorful, has given her some perspectives that are going to be very difficult to translate into responsible corporate governance. Ethan listened. He let the man talk. I'm not suggesting that your hospitality wasn't genuine, Richard continued. I'm sure it was. But Claire has a responsibility to 40,000 employees and a fiduciary obligation to her shareholders, and the kind of sentimental restructuring she's proposing is going to cost people real money and real jobs. A pause. I thought you should know what you've gotten yourself into. And I thought you should know that people are going to be looking very closely at your relationship with Claire and asking questions about what a struggling mechanic in Ohio gets out of befriending a billionaire. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Are you threatening me? He said. Not loudly, calmly. I'm informing you, Richard said. There's a difference. No, Ethan said. There isn't. And I'll tell you something, Mr. Hale. I've been a mechanic for 21 years. I know the difference between a machine that's working and one that's being held together with duct tape and good intentions. And from what I can hear, what you're running over there is the second kind. He paused. I think you should call your own lawyers instead of wasting time calling mine. Because Claire Morgan doesn't need me to defend her. And you already know that. He ended the call. He sat in the empty bay of the shop for a long moment. Then he called Claire. She answered on the first ring. Richard called you, she said. It wasn't a question. He did. What did he say? Ethan told her. All of it, accurately, without editorializing. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, Are you all right? I'm fine, he said. He's scared. Scared people say things they haven't thought through. He's more than scared, she said. He's going to come after me at the board meeting, with everything he has. He's been building toward this for 2 years, and he knows this is his moment. A pause. Ethan, what I'm about to do in that boardroom, it's not going to be quiet. It's going to be public, it's going to be messy, and it's going to require me to dismantle 2 years of positioning that Richard has done very carefully. Can you do it? He said. The question sat in the air for a moment. Ask me something harder, she said. He almost smiled. Thursday, he said. Geography test is at 2 o'clock. I'll be there by noon, she said. I'll bring lunch. She's going to ask you to quiz her on the capitals of Southeast Asia. I know all of them, Claire said. I know you do, he said. That's going to make her very happy. He hung up and sat in his shop with the November light going thin through the high windows and Richard Hale's voice still somewhere in the back of his mind, and he turned it over, and he set it down. And he went back to the transmission that was still waiting for him, because the work didn't stop. And the day didn't wait.
And there were some things in
this world that you could count on to stay exactly where you left them. The transmission was one of them. He was grateful for that. She came back on Thursday at 11:47 in the morning. Ethan knew the exact time because he was under a Ford F-150 when he heard Gerald say his name with a particular tone that meant something was happening that wasn't a mechanical problem. And he slid out from under the vehicle and stood up and saw Claire Morgan walking across the parking lot of Walker Auto, in a coat that actually fit her, carrying a paper bag from the diner on Clemens Street that he happened to know made the best chicken salad in Willow Creek. She looked different, not worse, not better different. The exhaustion he'd seen in her face for the first few days in his house was gone, replaced by something tighter and more awake. The particular look of someone who had been in the middle of something difficult and was still in the middle of it and had made their peace with that fact. She was put together in a way she hadn't been on Birch Street. Her clothes were hers again. Her posture had a precision to it, but her eyes when she looked at him were exactly the same as they had been across his kitchen table every morning. Gerald looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Gerald. Gerald suddenly found something urgent to do on the other side of the shop. You said noon, Ethan said. I made good time, she said. She held up the bag. I got the chicken salad. The woman at the counter told me it was the best in town. I told her I'd heard that. He washed his hands at the utility sink, and they sat in the small office off the main bay and ate lunch at his desk, which had invoices on one side and a framed photo of Lily on the other. And it should have been awkward, the billionaire CEO, and the mechanic eating diner food, surrounded by parts catalogs, and it wasn't. How bad is it, he said. The board situation. She set down her fork. Richard has 3 members committed to his position. 2 more are undecided. I have the remaining 6, but undecided doesn't mean safe, and he's been working the phones. She picked up her fork again. The meeting is Monday. 4 days. 4 days, she said. What happens if he wins? She was quiet for a moment. He doesn't take my ownership, she said. I own 51% of Morgan Horizon. He can't remove me. But he can fracture the board badly enough that the company's ability to execute the new direction becomes compromised. She paused. And he's been talking to 2 institutional investors who together hold about 12% of shares. If they move against me publicly before Monday, it creates a confidence problem. He's trying to make you look unstable, Ethan said. She looked at him. He's been telling the board that my disappearance was evidence of an executive who can't handle pressure. That the time I spent here was, he used the word breakdown, in an email to board members. My legal team has the email. Ethan sat with that for a moment. He put it in writing. He thought he was being careful, she said. He used his personal account. It still routes through the company server because he set up his personal email forwarding years ago and never changed it. A pause. He is very smart and occasionally very careless. That's always been the paradox of Richard. Ethan finished his sandwich. What are you going to say Monday, in the boardroom? The truth, she said. What the Regional Development Division has been doing without my oversight. What Horizon East would have meant for communities like Willow Creek. What the company was founded to do, and what it's been drifting away from. She paused. And I'm going to show them data. Not sentimental arguments, actual numbers. The long-term return on community-centered development versus displacement development. The liability exposure from the zoning manipulation Richard's team was doing in 3 other cities besides Willow Creek. She met his eyes. It turns out Horizon East was not the only project of its kind. My team found 2 others in Michigan and 1 in Kentucky. Ethan went very still. How many shops? He said. How many people like me were in the way of those projects? She held his gaze. 47 properties across the 3 projects, she said. 47 small businesses or residential properties in communities that didn't have the resources to fight a well-funded developer in a zoning hearing. She paused. 3 of them had already sold. Under pressure, he stood up from the desk. Not in anger, he wasn't an angry man by nature, and he knew that anger without direction was just noise. He stood because he needed to move, needed to do something, with the specific outrage of knowing that what had almost happened to him had already happened to other people who never got a phone call from the CEO. He's been doing this for 2 years, Ethan said. At minimum, Claire said. Possibly longer. He stood at the small window of the office and looked out at the shop floor where Gerald was doing something deliberate and focused, and had been with him for 9 years, and had a family and a mortgage, and had nearly lost all of it to a strategy. Meeting in Columbus that nobody in Willow Creek had ever been invited to. You have to win Monday, he said. I know, she said. Not for me, he said. I'm going to be okay. The refinancing is moving forward. The shop is fine. But those 47, I know, Ethan. Her voice was quiet and absolute. I know. He turned around. She was looking at him with that expression, the open one, the one without the management and the architecture. I need to go get Lily, he said. Her test is at 2. I know, Claire said. That's why I'm here. They drove to the school together in his truck, which was the most normal and the most surreal thing Ethan Walker had done in what felt like a very long time. The school parking lot had 2 cars in it that didn't belong, which he identified immediately as press a woman with a camera phone who straightened when she saw the truck and raised the phone. Claire saw it too. Keep driving, she said. Go to the side entrance. He went to the side entrance. They got Lily out of her classroom at 1:55, and Lily came through the door, saw Claire standing in the hallway, stopped completely, and then walked forward with the deliberate composure of a 9-year-old who has decided that showing too much feeling is a tactical disadvantage. "You came back," Lily said. "I said I would," Claire said. Lily studied her for a moment. Then she said, "I know the capitals of all the Southeast Asian countries." "I studied extra." "I know you did," Claire said. "Your dad told me." "Can you quiz me on the way home?" "Absolutely," Claire said. Lily looked at her father. "She can sit in the front," she said, with the particular generosity of a child who has calculated the terms of a concession in advance. "I'll sit in the back." Ethan looked at his daughter and thought about all the things he was going to have to explain to her in the coming days and weeks about who Claire was and what it meant and what the cameras in the parking lot were doing there and why the world had suddenly gotten interested in their small life on Birch Street. He thought about how he was going to do that in a way that was honest without being frightening and real without being complicated. He thought Lily would probably be fine. She usually was. "Let's go," he said. That evening, after dinner, after Lily had gone to bed, satisfied that she was going to pass her geography test in the morning, Ethan and Claire sat on the back porch with 2 cups of coffee, even though it was cold, because the kitchen felt too small for the conversation they needed to have, and the open air helped. "Tell me what you need for Monday," he said. She looked at the dark yard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been preparing for 4 days and you're going to walk into a room with people who have been working against you, and you have the facts on your side, but facts aren't always enough. So tell me what you need." She was quiet for a moment. "I need to not feel like I'm doing it alone," she said. It came out simply, without the careful management, the way things did from her, now in the dark, in the cold, on the back porch of his house. "I've been walking into rooms alone for 23 years. I'm very good at it. But this particular room, on this particular Monday, I would like to not feel alone in it." "You're not alone in it," he said. She looked at him. "You haven't been alone in it since I pulled over on that road," he said. "That hasn't changed. It's not going to change because you go to Columbus for a board meeting." She held his gaze for a moment and then looked away, and he saw her jaw move the way it did when she was keeping something inside that wanted to come out. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one. Not the one I gave you at the kitchen table when I was explaining the situation. A real one." She paused. "I used your house as a hiding place. I let you feed me, and care for me, and share your daughter with me. And I did it, knowing that every day I stayed without telling you, the truth was a day I was lying to you by omission. And I told myself it was complicated, and the truth is it was simple, and I was afraid." He was quiet. "You deserve to know," she said, "from the first morning. You deserve the choice of whether to keep helping me when you knew who I was, and I took that away from you because I wanted something for myself. That's the truth of it." She paused. "I'm sorry." He sat with that for a moment. "Apology accepted," he said. She looked at him. "That's it? What do you want me to do?" he said. "Stay angry? I told you in the kitchen I can't get there." "I've tried." He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "You made a mistake. You know you made it. You told me about it straight when it mattered. That's about as much as you can ask of a person. Most people would want more than that," she said. "I'm not most people," he said. "No," she said. "You really aren't." They sat in the cold for a while longer. The neighborhood around them was quiet and dark and ordinary, and somewhere in the house behind them, his daughter was asleep under the blue blanket she had picked herself, and the furnace was running, and the kitchen light was on the way it always was, and everything was exactly what it had always been and completely different at the same time. "Monday," he said. "What time does the meeting start?" 10 o'clock, she said. "Call me when it's done," he said. "Doesn't matter what time, call me." "I will," she said. He went to bed. She stayed on the porch for a while longer. He heard her come inside at close to midnight, heard the quiet sounds of the house absorbing her back into it. And he lay in the dark and thought about Foshan 47 Properties and a man named Richard Hale, who had put his confidence in writing And then he stopped thinking and slept. Monday arrived the way important days do ordinary in the morning. Everything the same as it always was until suddenly it wasn't. He made eggs. Lily passed her geography test, as reported by a text at 2:15 from her teacher, who had his number for school communications and had apparently decided this qualified. Claire had left for Columbus at 7, dressed in what he could only describe as the executive version of herself, precise, composed, the full armor of someone who was going somewhere to win something. She had stopped at the door on her way out. "Ethan," she said. He was at the stove. He turned. She looked at him for a moment, like she was going to say something more complex, and then she said, simply, "Thank you." "Go win your company back," he said. She went. He spent the day at the shop, and didn't check his phone more than was reasonable, and told himself he wasn't counting the hours. Gerald asked once, around noon, how things were going, and Ethan said, "Fine," and Gerald nodded, and went back to the brake job he was doing. And neither of them said anything else about it, because there was nothing else to say that the work wasn't already saying. At 4:17 his phone rang. He was in the office. He picked it up before the second ring. "Tell me," he said. A pause. 1 second too, long enough that his chest tightened. Then Claire said, "It's done." He let out a breath. "And I have the board," she said, 7-3. Richard moved one of the undecideds to his column, and I moved the other. A pause. It wasn't close in the end. The email was the email he sent. Calling my time here, a breakdown was read into the record by my legal team, and there was a particular silence in that room that I don't think Richard had anticipated.
Her voice was controlled.
But under the control, there was something that sounded like the specific relief of someone who has been holding something very heavy and has finally been allowed to set it down. He resigned, effective immediately. His legal team will be in touch with mine about the exit terms. Ethan sat very still. He resigned. He knew the vote, Claire said. He knew what 7-3 meant for his position going forward. Richard is many things, but he is not a man who stays in a room where he doesn't have the leverage. A pause. "It's over. It's over," Ethan said. "The board approved the new strategic framework," she said. "All of it. Community investment, affordable development, the small business support initiative I've been building." She paused. "I named it, the framework. I called it the Willow Creek model." He blinked. "You named it after." "After the place where I remembered what I was doing all of this for," she said simply. He didn't say anything for a moment, because the thing sitting in his chest was too large to put words around quickly, and he'd learned not to try. "Claire," he finally said. "I know," she said. "Come home," he said. And then, because he heard the word he'd used and needed to be honest about it, he said, "I mean come back." "To Willow Creek." A pause. "I will," she said. "I need 2 days to manage the transition, to make sure the right people are in place for the handoff of Richard's responsibilities. And then I'm coming back." Another pause. "If that's still all right." "The porch light will be on," he said. She came back Wednesday evening. He didn't make a production of it. He picked her up at the edge of town, where she asked him to, because there were still 2 media vehicles doing slow drives past the house on Birching Street. And they drove home in the dark with the heat up and talked about the board meeting, the way you talk about a hard meeting that is now behind you, not relieved exactly. More like the particular sobriety of people who have been through something and know the full cost of it. "Richard's going to be fine," she said. It didn't sound like comfort, just fact. "He'll land somewhere. He's talented. He'll find another room to run." She paused. "I hope it's a room that's better suited to what he actually is." "Which is what?" Ethan said. "A man who is very good at making money and genuinely doesn't understand why that's not enough," she said. "He's not a villain. He's just someone who stopped asking the harder questions a long time ago and surrounded himself with people who would let him." Ethan thought about that. "You hired him," he said. "Not as an accusation, as an observation." "I did," she said. "Because 23 years ago, he was exactly what I needed. And I didn't notice when that changed." She looked out the window at the dark road. "That's on me." He pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on. Lily was still up, technically past her bedtime, sitting at the kitchen table with a book she was pretending to read when they came through the door. She looked up with the expression of a child who has constructed an elaborate pretense of innocence. "I was just finishing a chapter," she said. "Sure you were," Ethan said. She put the book down and looked at Claire. "Did you win?" "I did," Claire said. Lily nodded once with satisfaction. "Good," she said. "Dad was checking his phone every 5 minutes." "Lily," Ethan said. "He was," Lily told Claire. "He said he wasn't, but he was." "I counted." She looked at her father. "You owe me $1. I said she'd call before 5, and she called at 4:17. Ethan looked at his daughter. "When did we bet on this?" "I decided by myself," Lily said. "In my head. You still owe me." Claire was laughing, which was a sound Ethan hadn't heard from her, and which was entirely genuine and a little surprised, like a sound she'd rediscovered. "I'll cover the $1, she said. "I accept that," Lily said, and went back to the book that she was definitely not reading. The days that followed were quieter than Ethan expected. He had anticipated some version of a reckoning, a moment where the difference in their worlds became impossible to ignore, where the gap between a mechanic in Ohio and the CEO of a global corporation proved too wide to bridge over kitchen table conversations and morning coffee. He had expected it and prepared for it the way he prepared for most things, by deciding in advance that whatever it was, he would handle it straight. It didn't come, or rather, it came in small ways he was able to look at clearly. Reporters still came by occasionally. Claire handled them through Sandra Park with a consistency and a calm that he found, watching it, impressive in the particular way that genuine skill in a domain you don't practice is always impressive. She stayed in the guest room. She still made coffee in the mornings. She still helped Lily with homework. She took calls from her executive team at the kitchen table sometimes, and he heard those conversations in fragments, precise, fast, authoritative. A completely different register from the voice she used over dinner, and he understood that she was two people, in the same way he was two people, the mechanic and the father, and that neither version canceled out the other. He understood that. One evening, close to 3 weeks after the board meeting, she came into the shop at closing time and sat on the stool in the office the way she had started doing sometimes. Just being there while he finished up, which he had found he didn't mind at all. "I want to talk to you about something," she said. He was locking the register. "All right, the Willow Creek model," she said. "The community investment framework. I want to establish a local component here. Not as a grand gesture, as a practical thing. A fund for small business support. Low-interest bridge loans for businesses in situations like the one you were in with the bank. Technical assistance for owners who need financial guidance." She paused. "I want to do it through a foundation that has independent governance, so it's not tied to my company's corporate decisions. It should belong to the community." He turned around and looked at her. "How much are you talking about?" "Enough to be meaningful," she said. "I'd want to name the foundation independently. Something that reflects where the idea came from." She paused. "I thought about naming it after you." He looked at her. "Don't do that. I know you'd say that. Then why'd you tell me?" "Because I wanted to hear you say it," she said. A pause. "What about Rachel?" He went very still. The register key was in his hand and the shop was quiet around him, and the name of his wife, in this conversation, at this moment landed somewhere very specific. "The Rachel Walker Community Foundation," Claire said quietly. "For the belief that every family deserves a fighting chance." She paused. "She was the reason you stopped that night. You told me that. The reason you helped me. She should be part of what comes from it." He stood with the key in his hand and looked at the floor for a moment. He thought about Rachel, who had worked at the women's shelter on Clement Street and brought home cases the way some people brought home work emails, who had believed completely in the capacity of ordinary people to hold each other up, who had died at 37 and left him standing in a hospital corridor with a promise to keep and no roadmap for how to keep it. "Yeah," he said. His voice was slightly unsteady, which he allowed because some things earned that. "Yeah, that's right." Claire nodded. She didn't say anything else about it, because she understood, the way she had understood most things about him from very early on, when to speak and when to let something be what it was. The week after that, she told him she needed to go back to Columbus. Not permanently, she was clear about that. Said it before he could ask, which he appreciated. She needed to be in the office for the transition, for the restructuring that Richard's departure had created, for the new development that needed her direct presence. She would be back on weekends. She would call every evening. He drove her to Columbus again. Same truck, same highway, different November light. She had a bag this time, an actual bag, packed from the guest room, which had gradually become less a guest room and more simply the room at the end of the hall where Claire's things were. At the drop-off, she got out of the truck and turned to look at him through the open window. "Ethan," she said. "I know," he said. "I'll be back Friday." "I know," he said. She looked at him for a moment, with that expression, the real one, the one she'd stopped managing. "Thank you," she said, for not treating me differently. "When you found out," she paused, "a lot of people would have." "A lot of people are idiots," he said. She smiled, which was still something he had to resist making too much of. "Yes," she said, "they are." She went into the building. He drove back to Willow Creek. He was halfway home when his phone rang. He answered through the truck speakers. "Dad," Lily said. "Hey, Bug, is Claire okay?" "She's fine," he said. "She went back to Columbus for work. She'll be home Friday." A pause. She said, "Home," Lily said. He noticed his daughter had caught the same word he had. "She said she'd be back Friday," he said carefully. "That's the same thing," Lily said. He drove in silence for a moment. "Dad," Lily said, "Yeah. Is Claire going to stay, like actually stay? Not just visit?" He thought about how to answer that. He thought about what was true and what was too large to explain to a 9-year-old, and where those two things overlapped enough to be honest without being overwhelming. "I think that's something we're all figuring out together," he said. Lily was quiet for a moment. "I think she should stay," she said. "She knows all the capitals, and she makes good soup, and she looks at you like you're not embarrassing." Ethan blinked, like I'm not. "You're embarrassing sometimes, Dad. When you do the voice." "I'm not doing the voice right now." "I know," Lily said. "That's why I said sometimes." A pause. "She looks at you like you're not." He didn't say anything. "Just telling you," Lily said. "In case you didn't notice." He had noticed. He had noticed, and he had been careful about it, and he was still being careful about it. And he understood at 39 years old that careful was not the same thing as afraid, and that the difference between the two was worth getting right. "Go do your homework," he said. "I already did it," Lily said. "Claire helped me this morning, before she left." He drove the rest of the way home, with the radio off and the heat up, and the evening coming down over the Ohio fields on either side of the highway, flat and dark and familiar. And he thought about a woman who had memorized his daughter's test schedule and named a community fund after his wife, and who came back on Thursday at 11:47 in the morning because she said she would. He thought about what it meant to be the kind of person who came back when they said they would. He thought about what it meant to have let someone in. Friday came. She was at the door at 6:12 in the evening with a bag, and the particular energy of someone who has been working very hard for several days and is ready to stop. He opened the door before she knocked because he had heard her car in the driveway, which was something he had started to do without deciding to. She looked at him. He looked at her. "The zoning on the Michigan project," she said. "My legal team found the paper trail that connects it to 3 separate county officials. It's going to be a story. Come inside," he said. "And the Kentucky properties, 2 of the 3 businesses that were pressured to sell. My team reached out to the owners. They're open to conversation about the fund." She stepped through the door. "The foundation paperwork is done. The first board meeting is in 2 weeks. I put Gerald on it, by the way, as a community member. I hope that's all right." "Gerald's going to love that," Ethan said. "He sounded like a man who had opinions," she said. "I like people with opinions." "He has more than you know," Ethan said. "Take your coat off." Lily made dinner. She stopped. Lily made dinner. She decided she wanted to cook, Ethan said. She's been at it for an hour. I've been supervising from a safe distance. He paused. I think it's pasta. The sauce is from a jar, but she added things to it that she won't tell me about. Claire set down her bag. She took off her coat. She hung it on the hook by the door that it had become, over the past weeks, the hook where her coat went. From the kitchen came the sound of Lily saying something with great authority about garlic, and the smell of something that was actually not bad at all, and the ordinary sounds of a house that was fully occupied in the particular way that houses need to be to feel like what they are. Claire stood in the hallway and looked toward the kitchen. He watched her face do the thing it did, the thing she had stopped trying to control around him. The softening. The real thing under the competence and the precision and the 23 years of walking into rooms alone. She looked at him. Thank you for the porch light, she said. It's not a thing, he said. It is, she said. It is a thing. He nodded once. Come eat, he said, before Lily decides the garlic needs more garlic. She followed him to the kitchen. And the house, which had been 2 people for 3 years, and had briefly become 3, and then 2 again, and was now 3 again, settled around them all like something that had been waiting for exactly this configuration, and was relieved. In the way that only houses and families can be relieved, to finally have it. Lily's pasta turned out better than anyone expected, including Lily. She had added oregano and a pinch of red pepper flakes, and something she described only as a secret, which turned out, upon investigation, to be a small spoonful of peanut butter that she had read about online, and which, against all reasonable expectation, actually worked. Claire ate 2 servings and said so directly, without the performed enthusiasm that adults sometimes deployed around children's cooking, just the plain statement that it was genuinely good. And Lily received this with the satisfied composure of a person who had known all along. They did the dishes together, all 3 of them, which had become the end of dinner routine without anyone deciding it would be. Lily washed, Ethan dried, Claire put things away in the places she now knew without thinking, and they talked about nothing consequential. Lily's opinion on the upcoming science fair. Whether the diner on Clement Street had gotten worse, or whether they had just gotten used to something better. The noise the furnace was making again that Ethan kept saying he would look at. I'll call someone this week, Ethan said. You've said that for 3 weeks, Lily said. I know how to fix a furnace, Ethan said. You also said that, Lily said. Claire put the last pot away and said nothing, but the expression on her face was one Ethan had learned to read as her version of laughing. The contained version she used when something genuinely delighted her, and she hadn't yet fully surrendered to the habit of showing it. After Lily went to bed, they sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and Claire opened her laptop and walked him through the foundation documents. The Rachel Walker Community Foundation. He read his wife's name on the official incorporation papers and felt it the way he always felt her name when it arrived unexpectedly, a sharp, clean thing. Not only grief anymore, but something that had its own specific weight, not lighter than grief, but different. More solid, more permanent in the way that mattered. The first disbursements, Claire said. I want your input on the selection criteria. You understand this community in a way I don't yet. Who gets help, how it's structured, what the terms are that should come from someone who knows what it actually costs to run a small business in a place like Willow Creek. He looked at the screen. You're asking me to help run this. I'm asking you to help design it, she said. The governance board will run it. But the principles, yes. I want those to come from you. He looked at the document on the screen. He thought about Dale Pruitt and his $250. He thought about the 4 employees who had come in every day for years because this shop was a thing worth coming in for. He thought about the 47 properties and the 3 businesses in Michigan and Kentucky that had already been pressured into selling, and the owners of those businesses who were, somewhere right now, managing the particular devastation of losing something they had built. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. They worked for 2 hours. He told her what he knew, not in formal terms, not in the language of policy documents, but in the practical language of someone who had lived inside the problem. What a mechanic needed when a parts supplier raised prices suddenly. What a restaurant owner needed when a slow month hit in January. What the difference was between a loan and a lifeline, and how often the two things looked identical from the outside and completely different from the inside. She listened. She typed. She asked questions that were specific and intelligent, and that he noticed, as the hours went on, were getting less about the business mechanics and more about the human architecture underneath. What made someone ask for help? What made them not ask? What the difference was between pride and shame, and how you designed a system that could reach past both. He went to bed at midnight. She stayed up. He found the legal pad on the kitchen table in the morning, covered in her small, precise handwriting, 3 pages of notes that she had made after he went to sleep. And the first line at the top of the first page said, in capital letters, the point is dignity. Not charity, dignity. He read that line twice and left the legal pad exactly where it was. The foundation's first public announcement came 10 days later and landed in Willow Creek the way a stone lands in a still-out pond, the immediate impact, and then the rings spreading out from it in every direction. Local news covered it. The regional paper ran it on the front page. Sandra Park handled the national press inquiries with her usual precision, which meant that the story got told accurately and in full, rather than being compressed into the version that was easier to package. Gerald came into the office the morning after the announcement and stood in the doorway with his clipboard against his chest and a look on his face that Ethan had seen exactly once before, the morning Gerald's first grandchild was born. The foundation board, Gerald said. She put me on it. I know, Ethan said. She called me herself, Gerald said. Last night, explained the whole thing, asked me if I'd serve. He paused. I've been a mechanic for 31 years, Ethan. Nobody's ever asked me to serve on anything. She picks people who know what's real, Ethan said. Gerald nodded. He looked at the clipboard. He looked back at Ethan. She's something, he said. That woman is genuinely something. Yeah, Ethan said. She is. The first application to the Rachel Walker Community Foundation came in before the end of the week. A woman named Donna Marsh, who ran an alteration shop on the east side of town, 61 years old, had been in the same location for 18 years, was facing a lease renewal that her landlord had priced 30% above what she could carry. She needed a bridge loan of $8,000 to cover the gap while she looked for a new space and rebuilt her client base. Ethan read her application the same evening it came in. Claire read it over his shoulder at the kitchen table. Approve it, he said. The board needs to vote, Claire said. I know, he said, but she's going to get approved. Claire looked at the application. Yes, she said. She is. Donna Marsh got her loan the following Tuesday. She came to the foundation office, which was, for the moment, a converted room in the Willow Creek Community Center, and she sat across a table from Gerald Pruitt and other board members, and she cried quietly when they told her, and then she apologized for crying, and Gerald told her there was absolutely nothing to apologize for, which was the right thing to say, and afterward he called Ethan and told him about it. And Ethan sat in his truck in the shop parking lot and thought about Rachel, who would have known exactly what to say to Donna Marsh and would have said it without making a production of it. He sat there for a while. Then he went back inside and finished the day. 3 weeks after the foundation announcement, Richard Hale made his move. Not quietly, not through back channels, not the way Ethan might have expected from a man who had just lost a boardroom confrontation. Publicly, a long statement released through a financial media outlet attributed to anonymous sources at Morgan Horizon, but clearly shaped by Richard's hand, questioning the governance of the foundation, suggesting that the Willow Creek model was a vanity project designed to rehabilitate Claire Morgan's public image, following what the statement called, again, a troubling episode of executive absence. Ethan read it on his phone sitting at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning. Claire came downstairs at 7:15 and saw his face and said, "You read it." "I read it," he said. She poured her coffee and sat across from him. "He's not done," she said. "I knew he wouldn't be." "Richard doesn't concede, he reorganizes." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "He's going to keep putting pressure on the board narrative." He still has relationships with 3 members. And he's going to use them. What are you going to do? Ethan said. She looked at him steadily. Work, she said. What I've always done. You don't answer Richard Hale by arguing with Richard Hale. You answer him by making the work so undeniably real that the argument becomes irrelevant. She paused. The Michigan properties. We close on the community investment agreement next week. The 2 business owners who were pressured to sell, we're working on a recourse mechanism that might allow one of them to reopen. Another pause. That's the answer to Richard, not words, results. He looked at her. He called your time here a breakdown, he said. In public, again, I know, that bothers me more than it should, he said. On your behalf, not mine, she looked at him for a moment. Why does it bother you? Because I was here, he said. I know what happened here. I know what you were doing, and what it cost you, and what you figured out, and watching someone reduce that to a convenient narrative about instability. He stopped. It's dishonest, and I don't have a lot of patience for dishonest. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, Would you be willing to say that, publicly? He looked at her. What do you mean? There's a community forum next week, she said. Willow Creek Town Hall. We're presenting the Foundation's first quarter plan, the local investment commitments, the small business support structure. I've been asked to speak. She paused. I would like you to speak too. Not about Morgan Horizon, not about Richard, just about what happened. From your perspective, what you saw, what you thought. She met his eyes. You don't owe me that. I want to be clear. But I think there are people in that room, small business owners, working people, people who've been told their needs don't register on a spreadsheet who need to hear it from someone who looks like them. He sat with that for a moment. He was not a man who sought platforms. He was not a man who made speeches. He fixed engines, and he raised his daughter, and he kept his word, and those things had always felt like enough. But he thought about Donna Marsh crying quietly in the community center conference room. He thought about 47 properties. He thought about Dale Pruitt and $250 and the particular dignity of a man who was embarrassed to need help but needed it anyway. All right, he said. The town hall was on a Tuesday evening in December, and the community center was fuller than Ethan had ever seen it, which was saying something because Willow Creek was the kind of town that still showed up for its town halls. There were local business owners and residents, and 3 people he recognized as reporters from regional outlets, and one he was fairly sure was from a national publication, which made him briefly wish he was somewhere else. Claire spoke first. She was extraordinary at it, not in the polished, managed way of a rehearsed corporate presentation, but in the specific way of someone who had finally found the right language for something they had been trying to say for a long time. She talked about Morgan Horizon's history and its drift and Richard Hale's influence without naming Richard by name. And she talked about the Willow Creek model in terms so concrete and specific that the room, which had started out politely attentive, became genuinely still with the particular stillness of people who are listening. Because they cannot afford not to. And then she said, I want to introduce someone who changed the way I understood what this company was supposed to be for. He's not a businessman. He's not a policy expert. He's a mechanic who stopped his truck on a dark road because someone needed help, and he was in a position to give it. And I think what he has to say is more important than anything I've told you tonight. Ethan stood up. He was not nervous exactly. He had the particular steadiness of a man who had decided what he was going to say and had said hard-hitting things before, and who understood that the room in front of him was full of people who were not his enemies. He talked for 12 minutes. He talked about his father's shop and the bank letter and Larkin Development and the zoning variance and what it felt told that the thing you built was an obstacle in someone else's plan. He talked about Claire showing up in his truck in the rain, which got a surprised ripple through the room, and about the 2 weeks on Birch Street, and what they had meant, not as a story about a billionaire, but as a story about what happens when someone with power decides to actually look at what their power is doing. He said, She didn't save my shop. I want to be clear about that. The refinancing saved my shop, and my employees saved my shop, and the customers who kept coming back saved my shop. What she did was remind me that I wasn't crazy for thinking I deserved a fighting chance. And she built something real, with real money, with real governance, to make the most late situation, has that same chance without needing a billionaire to drive by at the right moment.
Oh.
It's not for... He paused. That's not a feel-good story, he said. That's a system, and systems are what actually change things. He sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Gerald Pruitt started clapping, which was not a thing Gerald did easily, and the room followed. Afterward, in the parking lot, with the December cold, sharp, and clean, and the town hall lights warm behind them, Claire stood beside him and said nothing for a moment. Just stood there. You were right, he said. About what? About what they needed to hear, he said. I could see it. In the room, the way people were listening. You were right too, she said. About the system. She paused. I've been saying versions of what I said tonight for 20 years in boardrooms, where the only people listening already agreed with me. Tonight was the first time I said it to people who actually needed it to be true. He looked at her. Feels different. Completely different, she said. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Columbus area code. Number he didn't recognize. He answered because he had learned, over the past weeks, that ignoring Columbus numbers was less efficient than dealing with them. Mr. Walker. A voice he didn't know. Formal, careful. The particular carefulness of a lawyer or a very senior executive. My name is Thomas Kellner. I'm a board member at Morgan Horizon Holdings. I apologize for calling at this hour. Ethan looked at Claire, who couldn't hear the other end. Go ahead, he said. I'll be direct, Thomas Kellner said. Several of us on the board have been following the past few weeks closely. The foundation announcement, tonight's town hall, we've also been following Richard Hale's media activity since his resignation. A pause. I want you to know that the board members who supported Richard's position, 2 of the 3, have reached out to Ms. Morgan's office today. They are prepared to formally endorse the Willow Creek model at the next board session. Another pause. Richard's public statement this week was the last straw for most of them. Whatever one thought about the strategy debate, conducting it through anonymous media placement is not something this board is comfortable with. Ethan said, Why are you calling me and not Miss Morgan? A slight pause. Because I wanted you to know, Thomas Kellner said. What you said tonight. We had someone at the town hall. It was recorded. I watched it an hour ago. Another pause. What you built in that shop, Mr. Walker. Your father's shop. I have a brother-in-law who lost his auto shop in 2019 to a development project. I watched him lose it. I sat on this board and approved quarterly reports that included projects exactly like the one that took his shop. And I told myself it was necessary, and I did not look at what necessary meant. A long pause. I'm looking now. I wanted you to know. Ethan stood in the parking lot with the phone against his ear and the December cold around him, and Claire beside him watching his face, and said, Thank you, Mr. Kellner. I appreciate you calling. He ended the call. Claire looked at him. Who was that? He told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, 2 of the 3. 2 of the 3, he said. She closed her eyes for just a second, which was the version of relief she allowed herself in public. Then she opened them and looked at him with the expression that was only ever entirely real when it was only the 2 of them, which the parking lot nearly was. Gerald having already headed to his car, and the last of the town hall attendees filtering out through the community center doors. Ethan, she said. I know, he said. I mean it. I know when you say that, but I need to say she stopped. She looked at him with the completely unmanaged version of herself, the one she had stopped trying to contain around him, months ago. I came back because of you. I went into that boardroom because of you. I stood up in there tonight because of you. Not because you told me to. Because you showed me what it looked like to do something. Because it was right, without calculating the return on it, without needing it to make strategic sense. You do it, every time, and I needed to see that. I needed to remember that it was possible. She paused. I'm not going to manage what I'm saying right now. I'm just going to say it. You are the most quietly extraordinary person I have ever met in my life, and I am very grateful that you pulled over." He looked at her for a moment. "I pulled over because you collapsed," he said. She almost laughed. "I know, and because Rachel would have been furious with me if I hadn't." "I know that too. And because it was the right thing," he said. "That's all it ever was, the right thing." He paused. "But I'm glad you were the one on those steps. I'm glad it was you." She looked at him. He looked back. December around them, the town quiet and cold and completely itself, and neither of them said anything else, because the thing between them had gotten large enough that words were the wrong instrument for it, and they both understood that. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. January came. Then February. The Rachel Walker Community Foundation approved its first 7 loans in January and its first grant in February, a community garden project on the east side of town that had been trying to get funding for 3 years and had been told 11 times that it wasn't the kind of thing that attracted investment. The woman who had started the garden project, a 70-year-old retired schoolteacher named Harriet Cole, showed up at the community center to accept the grant check and said, "I stopped believing anyone was going to help with this. I figured I'd just do it myself until I couldn't anymore." She paused. "I appreciate being wrong." Gerald read that quote into the record at the next board meeting, and nobody said anything for a moment. The Michigan story broke in late January. The paper trail connecting the Horizon East zoning manipulation to county officials turned out to be more extensive than Claire's legal team had initially found, and when it hit the regional press, it hit hard. 3 officials under investigation, 2 others who had accepted consulting fees from a Larkin Development LLC shell company that had been set up specifically to handle what the legal documents called, with a particular euphemism of corporate malfeasance, community relationship management. Richard Hale's name was not in the story. His fingerprints were. Claire called Ethan from Columbus at 9 in the evening the night the story dropped. He was sitting at the kitchen table with the legal pad she used for notes, which he had started using himself, because it was always on the table, and it was the right size for the kind of lists he needed to make. "Have you seen it?" she said. "I've seen it," he said. "My legal team is cooperating fully with the investigation," she said. "I want to be ahead of this." Morgan Horizon's regional development vision was the vehicle, even if it was Richard's initiative. It happened under my company's umbrella, and I am not going to spend 1 second pretending otherwise. "I know you're not," he said. "The board called me tonight," she said. "Thomas Kellner, the board chair, and 2 others. They want to issue a joint statement with my office. Full cooperation, full transparency, full acknowledgement that oversight failures allowed this to happen." She paused. "That's the right call." "Yes," he said, "it is. It's going to cost the company," she said. "Settlements, legal exposure, reputational damage in markets where the regional development arm was the primary interface. It's going to be a hard year financially." "You'll get through it," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm not worried about getting through it. I'm telling you because I want you to know the full picture. I don't want to edit things for you anymore." He looked at the legal pad on the table. "I know you don't," he said. "I can pause." "How's Lily?" "She's asleep," he said. She had a science fair project due today, and she built a model of the water cycle out of materials she described as found objects, which turned out to mean things from my shop that I definitely would have said no to if she'd asked. "Did it work?" "Extremely well," he said. Her teacher said it was the most technically accurate model she'd seen in 10 years of teaching. Lily attributed it to intensive research and prior knowledge of mechanical systems. He heard Claire laugh. The full version, unreserved, the one that had become regular now, and that he would not have traded for anything. "She's going to run something someday," Claire said. "God help whoever works for her," Ethan said. "I mean that as the highest compliment," Claire said. "I know you do," he said. She came back Friday. She came back every Friday. And every Monday morning she went back to Columbus. And every evening she called. and the weeks built on each other the way weeks do when the life inside them has the right weight. The community center hosted the Rachel Walker Community Foundation's first anniversary event in early spring. 1 year from the incorporation date. Not a gala, not a fundraiser, a lunch. Folding tables and donated food, and the actual loan recipients and grant recipients in the room, which was Claire's specification, and which Ethan had backed immediately, because the alternative, which was a formal dinner in Columbus, with donors and press, and people who hadn't needed the foundation, but wanted to be associated with it, was the opposite of the point. Donna Marsh came. She had found a new space, smaller but better located, and her business was running well enough that she had already made her first loan repayment 2 months ahead of schedule. She brought alterations she'd done as a gift she'd taken in the waste, on a blazer of Claire's that had been slightly off since a weight change, and she'd done it perfectly. And Claire put it on right there, and looked in the mirror someone had brought for exactly this purpose and said, "This is better than when I bought it." Donna said, "That's always the goal." Harriet Cole came with 3 other members of the Community Garden Project and a box of seeds she had brought to give away to anyone who wanted them. She went around the room distributing small paper envelopes with handwritten labels, and she got to Ethan and pressed one into his hand and said, "Tomatoes. They need full sun and patience. Sounds like something you've got." Gerald came with his wife, who had never been in a room with Claire Morgan before and who managed it with the considerable grace of a woman who had been married to Gerald Pruitt for 27 years and had met every kind of person there was. She pulled Ethan aside at one point and said, "She looks at you like you're the only stable thing in the room." Ethan opened his mouth to say something and she said, "I'm not asking you to respond to that. I'm just telling you," and went back to the buffet table. Lily was there, which was a Friday and a school day, but which Ethan cleared with her teacher on the grounds that some things were educational in ways that school couldn't replicate. She wore the dress she had selected herself, which was red and had pockets, and she moved through the room with the self-possession of someone who had been watching her father navigate complicated situations with dignity for most of her life and had decided to practice the same approach. At one point, Ethan watched her standing with Harriet Cole, looking at the seed envelopes, and he heard Lily ask what kind she should plant. And Harriet said, tomatoes needed patience, and sunflowers needed room, and herbs were for people who paid attention. And Lily considered this and said, "I'll take all 3, which was such a complete expression of his daughter's character that he had to look away. Claire appeared beside him. "She just told Harriet she wants to start a garden," she said. "I heard," he said. "In the backyard," Claire said. "She's already identified the square footage." "Of course she has," he said. Claire was quiet for a moment. They stood side by side and watched the room, the folding tables, and the ordinary people and the year of work made visible in the faces of the people it had reached. Donna Marsh talking to a woman. Ethan didn't know who had a business card in her hand, and a look on her face like someone who had just found out that asking for help was possible. Gerald's wife laughing at something Gerald had said, which was unusual because Gerald was not typically funny but was apparently making an exception. Harriet Cole moving through the room with her seed envelopes like she was planting something wherever she went, which she was. "Ethan," Claire said. "Yeah, I want to stay," she said. "Permanently. Not the weekends in Columbus arrangement. Here, Willow Creek," she paused. "I can run Morgan Horizon from anywhere. I've been running it from your kitchen table for months, and the board has stopped finding it unusual." She paused again. "I want to stay here. I want to be here for the foundation. I want to be here for Lily's science fairs and her geography tests and whatever she decides to plant in the backyard." She turned and looked at him fully. "I want to be here for you. If that's something you want." He looked at her. He thought about pulling over on the dark road, which he had done because it was the right thing, and because Rachel would have wanted him to, and because some decisions are made before you make them. Made at the level of who you are, rather than what you choose. He thought about the blue blanket and the morning eggs, and the legal pad covered in her handwriting. He thought about the phone call from Thomas Kellner in the parking lot, and Gerald's face the morning after the foundation announcement, and Lily saying she looks at you like you're not embarrassing. He thought about all the things he had been careful about for the past months. Careful in the right way, the way that was honoring on the weight of something, rather than being afraid of it. He said, "Lily already moved your books to the good shelf." Claire blinked. "What?" "The shelf in the living room," he said. "The one by the window with the good light. She reorganized it last week. Put your books on the section," she said. "Get the best reading light." He paused. "She didn't ask me, she just did it." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face moved through several things in quick succession, and settled on the unguarded, real version that he had come to understand was the truest measure of how she felt. "I'd like to stay," she said. "Then stay," he said. And it was that simple. Not because simple things don't cost anything, but because some things are worth exactly what they cost, and both of them had paid enough to know the difference. The community center was full around them, and the spring light was coming through the windows, and Lily was somewhere in the room planning a garden, with the total confidence of a person who has never once doubted that what she planted would grow. Gerald was making someone laugh. Donna Marsh was exchanging business cards. Harriet Cole had run out of seed envelopes and was looking pleased about it. And Ethan Walker, who had pulled over on a dark road in the rain, because it was the right thing to do, stood in a room built from that one decision and understood something he had not fully understood before, which was this. The moment you choose decency over convenience, you cannot know where it ends. You cannot see the room it builds. You cannot see the faces that will one day fill it. You stop anyway. You carry the stranger in from the rain. You make the eggs. You leave the porch light on. Because some things do not require a reason beyond what they are. And what you are, who you have decided to be, is the only answer that has ever mattered. The stranger you rescue may change your life forever. But it is who you are in that moment of choosing that defines every life you touch afterward. That is the only legacy that endures. And Ethan Walker, mechanic father, son of a man who put his name above a door in 1987, and meant it had known that truth long before he knew it. He had just been waiting for the right rainy night to prove it.